back to school briefs. As usual, here with Claire, but really pleased to also have Bevan Holloway with us. Last time we spoke with Bevan was around the amazing work that he had done alongside others around uh, the Te Tiriti o Waitangi Tribunal, and that was pretty close to a term ago now. And so, great to have you back. How's things going?
We're waiting and waiting for the second stage of that report.
Do we know the timeline, or is it just a waiting game?
It's a waiting game. Yeah. So I think people have been reaching out to some of the legal team just to find out. But yeah, I think we're just in that kind of waiting mode. I think there was some crossover with the other urgent inquiry that sort of sprung up around Goldsmith's shenanigans. And there was some panel members across both. And I think possibly there's a bit of a bottleneck going on there.
And remind us again, what happens once that comes out? Do we know what happens once that comes out, or do we see how it lands?
I think it's going to be damning because that second stage report is where the bulk of our evidence was. So we'd had time to prepare for the issues that were being covered, because that was just going to be the original report, stage 2.
Yeah.
So stage 1 report was bad enough based on the small amount of evidence that we managed to get in front of the panel for that. Oh, man. And then it was really interesting in that Goldsmith inquiry, Philip Joseph, the KC, pointed out that actually the government can't ignore tribunal findings. The tribunal is part of our judicial system. They can't just dismiss these things out of hand.
Yeah.
And so I think
it's
that's
not just uncomfortable. They can't just shelve it.
No. And I think there's considerations here for schools, right? And this probably bleeds into some other stuff that we're going to talk about soon. But what have we had? 1,800 schools put their hands up and say they're going to stand by Te Tiriti? Well, the rubber's going to hit the road when stage 2 report lands. If and says that there's been a breach. If the schools put their hand up and to say they're going to back Te Tiriti, and then part of our judicial system says there's been a breach of the treaty, what are you going to do now?
Is your sense that what Paul Goldsmith is talking about is just like so wacky it's actually not going to end up coming to life, or do you reckon it's just mainstream National Party politics now?
I think the National Party we have now is not the National Party we had 10 years ago. And it is wacky. Yeah, it is extreme.
People have accepted more and more and more, and it's like every now and again I zoom out and look at the landscape, and I find it really upsetting at the kind of language and positioning we're willing to put up with. Like I looked at, Winston Peters' comments around the gender definition bill and calling protesters mouth breathers, and just like. I'm like, what that like, in what world is this an okay for our politicians to talk about fellow New Zealanders? Like it's actually been shocking, the level of sort of Trumpian language and positioning that we just seem to be, it feels like the country is comfortable with.
It isn't just that Trumpian. It isn't just that Trumpian way of working around policy. It's also the distinct lack of integrity verging on corruption, where you've got like Shane Jones taking like limousines to events that are like 3 minutes away from a hotel, and even just like refusing to comment on it and walk away. And it is that kind of approach to truth and corruption that we're seeing at different ways across the entire government. It isn't just one party. We're also seeing it this week. There's been lots of talk about these like no procurement contracts where you're seeing millions of dollars going to overseas education companies. And these seem to be getting negotiated over a flat white in the Gold Coast.
And again, there doesn't seem to be a pushback. And I know we haven't even got to our first topic. This is how we roll on School Briefs. But I sort of feel like there has been a general sense of acceptance, and I'm not sure because there's so much sort of unfathomable bad things going on that we don't know where to look and where to put our energies. I certainly feel concerned that in the education space there is a rising sort of sense of concern from educators. I still don't think the broader public knows what's coming down the line. Like I still don't think that the general public know just how much harm is already being done in the primary school space and potentially going to be done as those things like scripted practices become more commonplace, through to the absolute carnage that is going to be caused by our new senior qualifications if it rolls out the way it looks like it's going to roll out at present, which also segues really nicely into why we have Bevan here with us this morning, because I know, Bevan, you got to attend the Unmet Needs PPTA hui on Friday and Saturday. I was absolutely gutted. I tried twice. I went to the airport twice and tried to fly down to Wellington to join the event because I was supposed to be part of a panel, but unfortunately the weather gods said no. So can you take us through what those 2 days were like, Bevan? What was discussed and what was the feeling in the room, and what were the sort of takeaways from the event?
So I was focused on unmet needs, and you've got the sort of headline learning needs stuff there, but it also covered unmet needs from a cultural and economic perspective. We've got a lot of vulnerable kids in our schools, and we have a lot of marginalised kids. So the two go hand in hand, really. For me, it was just rage-inducing over the 2 days, just hearing from different people and different stories. I wanted to throw things at points, so I spent a lot of the couple of days just swearing under my breath at people.
Not people running a conference, hopefully.
No.
Other people who
causing the carnage
in the room. But like the overriding impression that I have is that, this is not a issue that is just because of this government, although they have made it markedly worse for students with the policies they've pursued and kids especially. But I just think it's an absolute moral failure on behalf of us as a nation to accept children being treated this way. And I think the people that are making the decisions, this isn't really a school issue. This is a policy and a funding issue, right? So this is totally around governance itself, and the people making decisions that are actively harming kids, and they know it's harming kids, they would never accept these things for their own children. And I just think that's absolutely disgusting. A lot of it is being amplified by the latest curriculum changes. I don't think we can see the unmet needs issues separate from that. I think one of the topics we're going to talk about a little bit, well, a couple of them anyway, a little bit later, they are just manifestations that are going to amplify the needs that these children have. These are very vulnerable kids that need to be looked after. And what was really interesting, they had a representative from the Teaching Council there talking about the work they'd done around effective practice for inclusion. And I was sitting there thinking like, fantastic, you've done this work, and man, can we back this 100%? Because what you're saying in this presentation here is that good practice is inclusive, and that's completely at odds with the direction of this curriculum. You can't tell me scripted practice is inclusive. It's not. And I turned to Bruce Jepson at one point and I said, I'm going to swear now, sorry people, close your ears. I said, fuck this science of learning bullshit, I'm done with it. Especially when you put that in front of it, I said, what we needed, we needed an ethics of learning. Let's have an ethics of learning before we even be guided by the science of learning. Because, anyway, that conversation spun off, as you can imagine it would have, with Bruce. So we heard from the Teaching Council. We had Bruce and Therese from Takatea kick us off on the first day. They talked about the tribunal experience and some of the things that had been found in that stage 1 report. And then they kicked off on Tuesday as well. And one of the things that they were trying to stress was that actually this is recolonization happening again. We're having the goals of the powerful being exerted on the vulnerable, and those vulnerable happen to be Māori and Pacifica primarily, right? They're the ones that figure mostly in these statistics. Not the only ones, of course. But so it was quite a confronting couple of days. We had Sarah Iono come and present the Beyond Capacity report which my reading of that is that, the language of support from this government is just nothing more than
translating,
not translating. It's just words that you can send out into the media sphere for spin and political gain. So, yeah.
One thing that I've really been wrestling with in the last wee while, and it's something that's bubbled away for quite some time, and it came to a head. There was a principal who wrote an opinion piece about why these reforms are going to be, much needed, that are a really good idea, particularly in the replacement of NCA space. And I looked at that opinion piece, and I looked at who the voices are who are being listened to, and actually, the voices who are being listened to are the voices of white privilege, are the voices of very privileged school communities who are fighting for a change which will just serve to pull up the ladder. So, and the thing that frustrates me is their communities aren't being underserved by the current curriculum or NCA. Like their communities aren't being penalised by it. Yet they still want to make changes to ensure that there's going to, in essence, be winners and losers. And I think ultimately, whether they want to say it or not, they want to protect the status of their qualification. And the only way they think a qualification has status is that not everyone actually can succeed. And I just think we've got to call these people to account. We've got to call these people to account who are heading up the most influential PAGs, the professional advisory groups, principal advisory groups, the curriculum advisory groups. And we've got to make sure that I think there has to be a step in the process where they see everything through the eyes of the most at-risk community first. And that is what guides their decisions, not through their sort of position of privilege. Like doing these, like I'm part of the PTA Tira Ano research, and we are all looking at different areas. And my area was looking at schools that have lent into the flexibility of NCA to design really robust programs of learning that are contextualised and suit their community. And, what struck me is none of these bloody people are gaming the system. Or at least if they are gaming the system, they're doing so in the most intellectual sense of the word. The amount of rigor and research, all of them have been designed and refined over a number of years. All of them have been designed in partnership with community, a lot of them in partnership with academics. They have designed learning and assessment from the ground up that is respectful and reflective of the communities they serve. And absolutely all of them don't see a way forward under the new reforms.
That's so good, Claire. And I think just coming back to that point around how the kind of underlying theme of this government is around how we design all policy in a way that kind of protects the privilege of those that have. And I think probably where we have seen the biggest swing from the previous government, who seemed to be very deliberate around wanting to create a table where everybody could sit around, and that inclusion and equity was at the core of it. And I don't think all is lost, though. I think we're now 2 years into this, and I think we've transitioned from a time where everyone's like, hey, there's this big new idea, the early adopters are saying this is working really well, let's go and test it out. But I think it's over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've been having more and more conversations with colleagues who are starting to ask more critical questions around 2 years in, what kids in my class is this working for and which ones aren't? And I think what we're coming back to is that the ones that the science of learning is working for are actually those same kids that seem to do all right under a range
regardless.
of
Imagine that. Yeah.
And that no amount of having kids in rows and pulling kids that find learning challenging into the front row is actually having the cut through we need. And it goes back to a point you were making earlier, Evan, around this government has just got a cartoon version of what equity looks like. They are just desperate to want to buy into this idea that we can design education policy just for what happens between 9 and 3. And completely ignore the conditions and challenges that kids are bringing to school. And now what we're saying 2 years on is that those kids are still not finding success through schools because we don't have a system that is resourced or policy drivers set up to deliver it. And the last thing that I'll say is we quite often talk about the things that we want to come back to in the future. We need to start writing those down, Claire. But I think we should come back to how is it that this government is being able to sell these headlines and the way that they actually design policy announcements in which they never actually have to prove the success of it. And the learning support budget is the classic one because all of their major announcements were in the third or fourth year. And what we see at every budget is deliberate underspends and repurposing money that hasn't actually landed. I guarantee if you were to go and look 4 years into the future, what they said they were going to do in learning support and what they've actually delivered will be completely different.
Yeah. And think about the money they're spending on stuff that doesn't make any difference, right? The best thing you can probably do with those maths textbooks is take them down to cash converters and use the money that you get for them for your kids. You know, that's how useful they really are. But I think like
cash
just in terms of the I was
it's Bevan's time away from home. He loves a bit of cash converters.
Yeah.
Bevan, I feel like Liam was suddenly taken back to a past memory or something. He looked all nostalgic when you said cash converters.
Well, he used to walk past the shop window and look at the guitars or something.
Sorry.
But like the focus of my work over the last couple of years has been like sort of how has this happened? And I think, you know, when we trace it back, this government has a really, really simple view of what democracy is, you know, which is basically we win an election and we get to do whatever the heck we want. And that is not democracy at all, right? Democracy is the checks and balances, it's the processes, it's the guardrails that are in place that ensure participation and that people have been heard. And all of those have been ignored and in place of the voices of the favoured few that just echo whatever it is they want to hear. And part of that has been the disregard of te tiriti. You know, and I think that simple view of democracy is part of the recolonization of this project of this government. And it's Rata has said that this curriculum is a recolonizing tool for her and her. I don't think we can see these things as isolated things. Like that is the through line that, and it's a vision of this country that I think we should all say no to because it's not who we are.
You talking about the through line, like that takes me to the fact that, like on Tuesday, the System Reform Bill, Monday, Tuesday, it passed its third reading. So that means all that's left is it just gets royal assent and it becomes law. Yeah. So those of you who are long-time readers, listeners of AEC, you will know that we've covered the System Reform Bill a lot over the last year or so. And it is the biggest dismantling of our system. And in essence, recolonisation of a system that I remember in my whole, like, how long have I been teaching? 28 years, 29 years in education. This is like the biggest shift. This is, you know, potentially even bigger than tomorrow's schools, I think, in terms of how it positions the government and re-centralises the power. It basically falls into what you were saying, Bevan, about this belief that they're in government, so they make all the rules. What I find really interesting is the System Reform Bill has a series of areas that are of concern. The te tiriti removal of that from the responsibilities of the school boards, but also the re-centralisation of the curriculum decision-making, the re-centralisation of the functions of the Teaching Council being handed over to the ministry, the re-centralisation of aspects of property management. You know, across the board, we saw a whole lot from the education system and our self-governing schools being sucked into the power of the minister, the direct line of power of the minister and the ministry. And I don't know if people, certainly people beyond the education system, actually appreciate just how massive that is and just how damaging. But also, I wonder about the current government, because all of those decisions seem like a really good idea if it's your own party in power, because what they forget is the moment that gets handed over to, say, a coalition of the Labour and the Greens, they're handing over the power to the Labour and the Greens to more centrally make a whole lot of those decisions. So it'll be interesting to see if that re-centralisation actually the trouble is it doesn't settle us down as a system. It means that if anything, we could become more of a, pendulum swing back and forth under consecutive governments.
Yeah. Now, see, I think it's worse than that. I think they have cottoned on that the idea of like centralisation and anti-democratic approaches to policy is a value set that sits with them. And I think they banked on the fact that if you were to get a Labour Greens government, they wouldn't do the same thing.
Because it's just not in there. Yeah.
They would go back and take things back out to the sector. I mean, if we've heard anything out of Labour and Greens, it's that kind of idea that they want to hear more teacher and principal voice. And so I think the Nats have designed a dismantling of the education system that, while in theory could be taken advantage by a centre-left government, I think they've worked out that they wouldn't.
Yeah.
I agree.
Can I also...
I don't think they'd be brave enough to do it.
No. But I don't know if anyone else has like as exciting school nights as I do, but the one thing I did the other night is I went into a deep dive of the proactively released cabinet papers sitting on the system reform bill page, because I was trying to work out, I think this is past its third reading. So I went back to the original website, and then I noticed as I scrolled down that a whole lot of proactively released cabinet papers have been added, I think, since the last time I looked on that page. I'm not sure of the date that they were added. And then I realized that if you could click on the plus sign, there were even more papers buried down under there. And so I was ambling my way through them, and there was one called the Education System Reform Discussion paper. And in that paper were some absolute doozies. So if we can share the link under here maybe, or I can certainly share at a later date. That specific paper outlines the intention that exists that clearly the minister would like to hand over all of the functions of the Teaching Council to ERO. Now, if we are to take a step back and look at the recent appointment of the chair of the Teaching Council into the CE and Chief Reporting Officer, whatever their title is, at ERO, we've just seen David Ferguson taken from the Teaching Council into ERO. This paper debates whether they should hand over some of the functions or all of the functions, because that would be more efficient and it would cost less money. So I think we need to brace ourselves for the fact that it may well be the intention that the Teaching Council ceases to exist sooner rather than later, and that its entire functions gets passed over to ERO. It was a discussion paper, so discussion papers don't say X is the outcome or Y is the outcome. It simply exposes the discussions and the thinking that's taking place. Be very clear, there is an intention and a desire for the function of the Teaching Council and the Teaching Council in its entirety. At least that's how I read it. I think I shared it with both of you, that paper. It read to me like they were very seriously considering handing over all the functions. Was that your takeaway from the paper?
Yeah.
Well, while they talk about functions, what they're actually having a go at is that they don't trust school leaders to be able to adequately assess whether or not a teacher should be recertified. And so if you look at what it would look like to shift that to ERO and this new kind of blunt police officer approach that they're taking to assessing schools, where they want to go and start grading them between outstanding and good and terrible. If that is your model in which you view performance through, you are going to see the exact same thing happen in the way that they want to set ERO up to assess the work of teachers. And it'll still come through school leaders, but they will be given such a tight framework of measures that you could easily see a world in which teachers are given any type of rating between 1 and 4, and then perform.
So we're going to stop being a profession. We're going to stop being professionalised. We are going to be public servants who are managed so closely. Like I really worry. I still believe that we're going to see our standards change. I think we're going to lose our right to be able to speak out in the way that other public servants lose their right to speak out. I'm so concerned.
If that does happen, we can still do school briefs, but we'll have to use those voice modulators, so they won't be able to do
we'll be in a darkened room.
And again, we need to see these things in context, right? So that stuff that was written about on AEC by Vivian Dean last week around that instruction that was given to ITE providers around teachers, the expectation for 80% direct instruction, which the ministry tried to fudge and, say, oh no, it's all very completely normal and nothing to see here, and their commentary around it. But that's something that could be easily monitored, right?
Oh, and we already have mandate in the teaching standards. We have to deliver the mandated teaching and learning programs. That's already changed.
And you're already seeing it in the curriculum. So the last pages of the curriculum makes references back to Section 90 of the Education and Training Act to stipulate a particular pedagogical approach, which is structured literacy. So if you're a teacher in the English subject area from year 0 to 10 and you're not teaching structured literacy, you are literally breaking the law right now.
Yeah.
All right. So these are things that people need to be very, very wary of, because they will eventually be used with this centralization of power that is going on within a very narrow ideological group of people that are here to do something very specific, which doesn't include any reference to TTT at all. I've got a OIA in around the changes to the senior assessment framework. Qualification, that's the word. I've only had one coffee today. Give me a break. And I've hit it with the Ministry and NZQA, just asking, have they done any analysis around TTT obligations here? I got one back from NZQA on Friday, and gone through over 700 documents, and there is nothing that they've done to do an analysis around the obligations that the government has here. And then, but they tried to pass what's going on, but it's come from the ministry, so it's not really us. And it's like, well, no, I don't accept that, because you are the agency that's going to be delivering this.
Yeah.
And you've already had advice that's gone to Cabinet that said that Māori and Pacifica students are likely to be adversely affected by these changes. And you've done no analysis of your obligations around Te Tiriti in the last 7 months. Come on.
Yeah.
No, it's a shocker.
Just going back slightly to that kind of obsession with scripts. The other kind of sector player that really wants to be able to buy into that is going to be those large edtechs, because it'll be very easy to start using AI to script out lessons when it is all knowledge based, and it's teacher says this, student gets the answer right or wrong, teacher says this, and so then you have to start to follow the money around where we're going to start to see donations coming in from, because I wouldn't be surprised if we see EdTech seeing this as a huge opportunity for them to further integrate themselves into public education, into the charter schools movement.
And on that front, can I talk about one of my spidey hunches that I've been having for some time now, but came to the fore this week? So we had the Alt Ed report come out from Aero, and it was really interesting. That report has actually been around for a few months now, and they chose to release it on the day that the System Reform Bill passed its third reading, which in and of itself was a really interesting decision to hold off on that information. But one of the things that I'm really concerned about, so I wrote a piece for AEC earlier in the week about the Alt Ed report and the utter irony that we're being told that we should be doing more to keep those at-risk young people in our schools at the very time we have new Aero reports that actually penalise schools that choose to wrap around our most at-risk young people, because we are not going to be the schools that get the blue-green bloody bars on the new Aero reports. And so they are absolutely incentivising people removing those at-risk young people from their student populations. But also to do that at a time when we're getting a curriculum and an assessment framework that is going to penalise and make it harder for those very young people to succeed absolutely gutted me, because the irony is off the chart. But there was also one other aspect. There was some real criticisms of, that we've talked about Te Kura. And I thought about, why would this report come out now off the back of the System Reform Bill? And we know that the System Reform Bill, one of the things it does is it opens up the ability for chains of charter schools. Now, I have long believed that Crimson Education is gearing itself up for a takeover bid. I think it has been starting to position. We know it's taken over Summit School. We know it's taken over Hobson Middle School. It's basically been scooping up a lot of those sort of neurodiverse, at-risk sort of school providers. We also know they're an online school. They have those online academies, and they got approved for the first online charter school last year. I can't help thinking, remember John Key is the chair of Crimson Education. They are friends of the minister. They are friends of the current government. I can't help feeling like a report that critiques the functions of Te Kura and is highlighting the need of more resources and support for these particular young people, coming at a time where charter schools can be expanded into chains of charter schools, seems a little bit too convenient for my liking. I would be willing to put good betting money on the fact that our minister would like nothing more than to take the funding for Te Kura and shift it to Crimson Education and their online charter school offering.
Yeah, because she's got a track record of shoveling public money into private providers, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Yeah. Although there's been, in the last half an hour, a number of kind of things that we've spoken about that could happen in the future. There is a possibility that somebody from the minister's office watches this and is just starting to like, oh yeah, we weren't going to do that, but that's a great idea.
We can credit then, we're not very laced.
The whole...
we did say we want to grow our audience. Maybe that's our key. Just, expand our way through the ministry.
Influence. Love it.
Yeah.
The whole... it's funny, we've got to laugh, and if we don't, we might cry. Ginny Anderson mentioned something in Parliament this week, and I think we have mentioned it before, but not this part. But the minister took like 12 principals over to Australia to check out some kind of model schools. And Ginny Anderson said in Parliament that there were 2 principals that went on there that came back and talked about the use of dog clickers in classrooms. And so what she said is that whole class teaching, all kids were down on the mat and they were showed images. And if they chant at the right time, they get an approving buzz from a dog clicker.
Do they get some kibble thrown at them as well at the same time?
I mean, that's the whole Pavlovian response approach to education. But it's kind of like they've gotten a bit confused thinking that we actually have to do the dog-related part.
It beggars belief, but it sort of doesn't at the same time. Like, it's actually absurd. Like I was thinking not that long ago that we could reproduce Yes Minister and we wouldn't even need it to be satire, because it just feels like the reforms and the way in which they're rolling out in the light of day are beyond satire. They are so freaking absurd. But the trouble is they're coming and they're happening and they're being sold in such a way that people think they're fucking common sense.
Yeah. I think these people deserve to be laughed out of the room. It's so unserious. They don't know children. And I get back to my point I made earlier, right? It's just, would any of them accept their children being treated that way?
Yeah.
Well, absolutely not. So what gives them the right? And let's be clear, probably a lot of them are children from minorities in that place, So we're probably talking brown kids, poor kids. Look, it's the kind of thing that makes me want to throw stuff.
I think though that
rage back.
I think though that there is a bigger issue with that type of behaviour. After we get to the point that they actually believe it, is the message though that sends to parents around how kids learn, because teachers are seen as kind of professional, knowledgeable, despite the gutting of that idea from the government. But there is a world in which parents are going, oh, well, let's go and test our kids at home on some maths questions, and if they get it wrong, we'll turn the hose on them. I mean, it's that kind of like entry to kind of the way that you treat kids, thinking that you're doing the right thing. But
and that learning is about compliance.
Yeah.
That learning
and fear.
is, No, it's absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
And doesn't help the kids that needed the help the most.
Well, one of the things we wanted, I know we wanted to end on this, is this idea that we need to reach more people with these conversations. Like I'm really concerned that we're a bit of a bubble at Aotearoa Educators Collective. We're a growing bubble. We know we have a fantastic listenership and readership that hits around the sort of 3,000 mark each week, which is nothing to be sniffed at for something that sits within the education context. But my worry is that how do we get this out to our other colleagues? How do we ensure all of our colleagues understand what is going on? Because I get it. People are busy and they're in survival mode. I mean, heading into week 11 of term 2. Maybe that's by design as well. Maybe they wanted to make sure these things were landing in the world's longest term. I guess a bit of a request I have to our listeners is, can you introduce us? Can you introduce us to your friends in the staff room? Is there a chance that you could share an AEC Substack or share an episode of School Briefs with your colleagues? Get us outside our regular readership bubble, because we love our readership and watching bubble. But it would be fantastic to think we might be able to spread our reach a little bit further. And you, Liam, had a bit of an idea about some regional talks as well that could build on that idea.
Yeah. When I think about the next stage that we need to go to is how we kind of shift the conversation to being one where it's people connecting with our Facebook group or our Substack, and actually realizing that while they might feel relatively isolated within their school because none of this kind of critical conversation plays out, that actually we know firsthand that people aren't alone at a real local level. And that what we're going to try and do is set up some kind of local AEC meetups. And I don't think they need to be branded AEC meetups, but it is a useful way to kind of highlight that the purpose of getting together is actually realizing that there's other people that don't buy in boots and all to this kind of science of learning stuff. That actually wants to see greater balance in the way that we go about teaching and learning.
And respecting the professionalism of our teachers.
Yeah, that's right.
To do what's right to their kids.
And I think there is a really important point around needing to build the confidence of people that this isn't going to be New Zealand's education system for the next 20 years. Because if people do feel isolated, they are looking at what's playing out in their classrooms, knowing that it is letting down kids in their class. We just run the risk that some of our best teachers are just going to leave the profession because they're not interested in reading out scripts and hosing down kids if they get maths questions wrong. They actually have got some kind of bigger beliefs around how kids learn and the potential of children and the need to be creative. And so we think creating space locally for people to come together, I think, could be one of the most powerful things we end up doing.
Awesome. So I know that we're planning to get together a bit over the school holidays. I know Liam and I are planning to do some of our Learning on Tap recordings, but also put a bit of a scheduler together. I really like the way that the sun is giving me a really angry monobrow right now.
Look,
just as an aside. It really enhances my mood. Sorry, I got sidetracked. I get sidetracked by these freaking cameras. Okay, so Learning on Tap sessions will be coming. And also we're really keen to maybe hear from people in terms of where those regional meetups could take place. But also, please think about introducing us to your mates.
Bevan also swore on this episode of School Briefs. Did we kind of bleep that out, or do we just we haven't really spoken about that?
I would have been upset if Bevan didn't swear.
And to be fair, I did give people a chance to block their ears. I did say it was coming.
That is very true for the kids in the room.
That's right.
So people can. We fundamentally believe in people's ability to self-manage, don't we, as an entity?
We do. Right. We trust the people.
He also did say he was coming in with a bit of a rage as well, and so
And I tried to temper it. You should have seen me yesterday. So.
Are you feeling any better after kind of 40 minutes of talking about this stuff, Bevan?
Yeah, a little bit. And the Black Caps did really well last night too, so that helps. So, yeah.
Claire and I have worked out, even if other people weren't listening, we'd still do this once a week just because it feels good to kind of...
Yeah. It's therapy. Just let us know when you need to come back for another session. Just say the word and we'll make sure you're tuned in.
No, it's always good to talk to you guys.
Yeah.
And I'm set up well for Sunday now.
Awesome.
And we will all keep on fighting, and we're not going to let the bastards get us down.
Yeah, and actually that gets back to one of the speakers at the Unmet Needs conference was Dr. Jess Berritson-Shaw, and she really challenged us to tell a different story. Yeah. And she encouraged us to just turn our backs on the story that is being told right now. Don't even engage with it. Don't buy into the facts. Don't.
We've talked about principled resistance before, actually, and it's just we're going to do what's right. I certainly know as a school, we're not going to stop doing the things that we value. Ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of that is just refusal to buy into and talk about, and perhaps even, and that was one of the things that came up across the 2 days. What if we just said no, as a sector? Because these things are harming kids, they're going to harm them even further. What if we just said no and do the thing we know that we need to do for our kids and tell that story? I think you'll probably find more parents open to that story than the one that's been directed from on high. Yeah. And so that's a little bit of hope to finish on, maybe.
Yeah, let's wrap it up there and leave people to ponder that over the next week. Bevan, once again, thank you very much for joining us. Claire, great to see you again. Yeah. And we'll catch up next week.
Happy week 11, my friends. We made it. Woo!
Yes, almost.
Have a good one.
Ka kite.
Ka kite.